Hey. Good evening, everybody. So tonight it's obviously about these two right here. It's about you. 45 plus years of service to this community of faith. So welcome everybody who is here tonight to celebrate Steve and Margie Reed's service and membership in this community. I'll never forget when I first started just here in COVID, and the general, as he was introduced to me, came into my office for the first time and we started talking about stewardship. I just kind of looked at him and I nodded. I'm like, okay, I've dealt with generals before. I didn't tell him that when I was in the Navy that we were over in the Gulf War, we had an admiral come on board the ship for a while because we were the command ship of the fleet over in the Gulf. And, well, I don't know if I should say this in church, the admiral was a real P-R-I-C-K, all right? No one liked him, even our captain. But I knew how to deal with generals, admirals, those of that rank. I had some friends down in the mechanics, the machinist room in the battleship, and they had a bonding agent, which was used for emergency repairs, that bonded metal to metal. So I talked to one of my friends who was one of the Marine Guards in officers' country, where the admiral's stateroom was, and when the admiral was asleep that night, I snuck into officers' country with that bonding agent, and I sealed his door shut. And they had to cut him out the next morning. So I knew how to deal with generals. So we got along great. So Steve, it's been really wonderful working with you. I could not have done the stewardship and everything else for the last couple of years without your help. And Margie, you have been right there beside him, working along the way and doing everything you can to help make my transition easier as well. So I want to welcome everybody as we celebrate. We're going to have a prayer by Deacon Lorna. Then we're going to hear some people who want to give their own words of thanksgiving and memories. And then we'll go into the parish hall for a little celebration. I'm going to turn it over to Deacon Lorna.
Minute. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I met Margie before I met Steve. Yeah, because then Margie was in the office, and Margie was just about doing everything. Yeah, in the office. So I knew her as the person who you could count on for everything, the person who knew about the youth, the person who knew about the administrative portion of the church, the person who knew about the choir, just about every aspect of the church life. You could depend on Margie to either give you some information, give you some direction, just to be there and to provide the support that's needed to make what I am doing and what others were doing a little better. We know it wasn't always easy for Margie, but being the person that she is, I knew she hung in there until it came to the right time, and she did what she needed to do. Just like we all do what we need to do when the time comes to move on or not move on, we do what we need to do. Then I met her awesome husband. Yeah, I met her children and her awesome husband, and I saw the bond that they shared. I saw the way they stuck to it, and you could tell it wasn't always an easy street, but they stuck with each other. They bound together in love. They were an example of truly persevering, truly hanging in there, even when things were rough. They hung in there. And so Steve became more retired, more relaxed. And so I'm sure it got better. But they truly are an example for the church. Not only are they an example for the church in the sense of their demonstrating what it is to persevere in love, but they're an example to the church in the way they demonstrate passion for the church itself. Their passion for the church, their dedication to this community, their dedication to the mission of the church, their dedication to make sure that the church makes progress in its growth, their dedication to make sure that St. Mary Magdalene, at the time it was only St. Mary Magdalene, remained a viable entity, an entity that was truly reflective of who God is and who God is in community. And so I want to thank you. And so my prayer begins with Psalm 118. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good. His mercy endures forever. Gracious and Heavenly Father, we come today, we gather in your holy presence in this church, dear God, Lord, to celebrate your goodness, to celebrate your spirit flowing through the lives of Margie and Steve, of Steve and Margie, dear God. We thank you for that spirit which you have put in them both. We thank you, dear God, for their dedication. Lord, they're truly an inspiration to us all. And we give you thanks, dear God, for the way they have inspired us to grow in love, the way they have inspired us to grow in passion for you and your holy church, dear God. Help us, dear God, as they move on to follow their example, to walk in their shoes, to walk in the way of love inside the church and outside of the church. Father God, we pray for them, dear God, Steve and Margie, as they move on. Lord, as they begin the next chapter in their lives, we ask, dear God, that you will be with them in a mighty way, that you'll surround them, you'll be with them, you'll be in them, above them, below them, with them, sustaining them, dear God, in that chapter which now follows, dear Jesus. Bring them to the fullness of your love. Bring them to the fullness of joy. Bring them to the fullness of peace. And may their lives overflow. May their lives overflow, dear God, with that beauty which comes from abundant life in you. Into your hands, dear God, we put them both, and may they be blessed by your holy blessing. May they be filled with your joy and your peace this day and forevermore. Amen.
Dr. Stephanie Harris, come on up.
Hi, I love you both. Mabel asked me to speak to all of you. I'm sure it's because she thought I was going to be funny, but I'm actually going to be serious. I don't know how many years ago I joined the church, maybe 30 years ago. I did not know Steve at all, but I knew Margie, and I'm actually following what Deacon had said, that she was there. She and Susan Slimak would try to get me out of the car from reading the New York Times and get me into the Sunday school to participate, which you're laughing, which I slowly did, and I became very enamored with the church. Now, Margie, exactly what Deacon was saying, was a great deal a part of the office and about friendship and about other people, and always there for us. I'll do Margie first. Margie became a special friend to myself and to the Navajo people when she volunteered and asked to go on a trip with us. And she asked to do the early childhood education. Well, I thought she was really pretty straight, but I liked her. And until she started singing songs with those pre-K. Now, I am telling you, I could really sing some songs to you that Margie knew that were just great. And she read to the kids, and she was with the kids, and she was just a wonderful part of the Navajo experience. And those of you who were with her must remember how wonderful and friendly and happy she was with the children. Now, Steve, I've always known who the general was. And Aaron would tell me, don't be afraid, he's my father. And my kids went through with my husband for their confirmation classes, and he would sit with her sometimes. And we became fairly close to Aaron. Steffi, we would hear stories about. But Steve, you changed my life in a way that you don't even know. I mean, yeah, you belong to all these people that they're going to talk about, like, you know, the sons of whatever. But you just changed my life being on that committee years ago to look at our new priests and decide what it was that we wanted to do and wanted to incorporate in our church. And I got a whole different feeling about you. You were loving and you were kind. Not that I didn't think so before, but you were loving and you were kind, and it completely erased this idea of the general. And I am fascinated by the house you bought. I can hardly wait to buy a house that just has a key and you just enter. And I'm going to miss Aaron and Steffi terribly. But all of you four have been a wonderful, wonderful part of my life. I want to leave you with something that I'm sure you don't expect. Okay, first of all, because he's a West Point boy, I'll bet nobody can say that, I have a West Point bag and pen for Steve, for the general. And, thank you, and I have an angel Indian feather for Margie, which just fell out. But anyway, it's a pen, and you can tell how different they are, but I thought of both of them with their pens. Okay? So, thank you for being with us. I love you. All right. Thank you.
Chuck, Fountain, come on up.
Good evening, everybody. You tell when you're getting old, you have to take off your glasses to read. No, I'm all mixed up. When we talk about getting in shape, particularly so at this time of year, when we talk about getting in shape, particularly at this time of year, okay. When we talk of getting in shape, oftentimes we only think of physical shape, especially at the start of a new year. But General, and this one is for you, not Margie. You remind us of what it truly means to get in shape and to stay in shape. It's not just physical, but mental, spiritual, emotional, and financial as well. Physically disciplined and tough, exemplified by missing your daily exercise workout only 3 times in 3 years. Did y'all know that about Steve? He missed going to the gym 3 times in 3 years. So talk about physically disciplined. Sharp, focused, always in mental control, but yet still intense. When past rectors wanted to read our church, they often turned to you, Steve. Why? Because you're like a calm, cool, and collected pilot flying his passengers soothingly and reassuringly through a series of thunderclouds. and you instinctively know the difference between the true but the trivial and the urgent and important. Spiritually, you walk your talk. How long have you been a faithful member of St. Mary Magdalene and St. Martin again? That's a rhetorical question. And if you get to chat with you, you realize that it is this faith upon which all of your strengths are soundly and solidly built. Financially, again, listen to you. You have lived and enjoyed your day-to-day life, traveling, cruising, spending quality time with friends, etc. Yet you have successfully managed to prepare for a comfortable retirement. And your story here gets even better by your volunteering to start and manage St. M&M and St. M's The Vine, and the financial knowledge you bring to your Episcopal charities work. And if knowledge is knowing, wisdom is understanding how to use this knowledge practically and purposefully. Finally, Steve, emotionally. You make no big deal of crying a tear or shedding a tear if a tear needs shedding, of hugging or even kissing your beloved grandchildren openly and unabashedly. And the love you show for your loving and gracious wife, Margie, the wind beneath your wings, is exemplary. You are truly a man's man. Know the way, show the way, go the way. Thank you, Steve, so much for your leadership and your friendship, and for the inspiration you provide to us all by how you live your life.
Sue.
Well, that was a tough act to follow. Holy mackerel. I'll keep it brief. I mean, everybody's here because we love you. You have been so much like the cement of our church. When I came here, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, you were one of the first people to greet me. And I think everybody probably could say that about Margie, right? And then Steve, we know where you sit. So it's, always here, always stable. I've been in the kitchen with Margie before, and if you've been around her in any intense situation, Navajo, I'm sure, brought its own. Cool as a cucumber. I don't know how you do it, but then you did have 2 wonderful children, and how many grandchildren now? 4. Well, and we know why you're leaving. We know that it's tough for you, but it's so important to be with your family, and we want that for you, obviously. And, when we look at you, we know what we get. You have your heart on your sleeve. You're right out there. Steve, it's hard to read you, but I've heard you say, yeah, right. I've heard you say several times, I don't know why people say that about me, because it's hard to read you at first, but boy, to get to know you. The heart on the sleeve works for you as well. We've seen your tears, we've seen your joy, and that's probably enough for me. I thank you for being with us all these years, and we certainly want to see you come back.
Michelle and Sherry.
I agree next time. Let us go before Chuck, okay? Stay with me. I don't like to do this. Margie, just like Sue said, that's why we're here, because we all love you and Steve. Some of you might not know about our amazing little preschool next door. And do you know who started that preschool? Margie. Margie and a friend started that preschool. And it happens to be the best preschool around, was then and still is. It It is really an amazing, really warm, loving place. And the people that have come through here, the families, because I happen to have worked there. I was one of the directors. And of course, when I first came, of course, Margie was the first person I met also. And we were so lucky to have her lead by example, not only to the children, but to all of us adults. And we love how she took any situation and turned it into a positive. Foremost, as a leader of the preschool, her constant reminders of always, remember, it's supposed to be fun. And that still rings in our ears and have served us well, even beyond our years at the preschool. And of course, she always smiles and adds, it's all in God's hands. And a good example of that is when I was the director and a child came with lice. And of course, we know that exists and you have to deal with that. But when you're the director and it happens, you're like, oh my gosh, oh no, I can't do this. And Margie's like, don't worry, Michelle. So she helped me so much being able to handle anything that happened. So thank you.
I brought along the preschool chapel candle, and I would like to light it and say our preschool prayer for you. It goes like this. We light this candle as a reminder that we are Christ's light in the world. And you are certainly Christ's light in the world. Margie was also the first person that I met. I had enrolled our oldest, who's 26 now, in the Catholic preschool, and I got on a waiting list. I'm like, oh no, what am I gonna do? I thumbed through the yellow pages, and I called until I could find the least expensive preschool. I called, and Margie answered the phone. She's like, sure, come by, I'll give you a tour. Liz was across the West Coast visiting her mom, the former preschool director. I come in, there's no lights on, there's no AC on, and I'm thinking, what have I gotten myself into? And I got to meet Margie. And I'll never forget Andrew's face. He saw this little cloth doll of Jesus. He's like, Mom, is that Jesus? And I just knew between that and Margie that I was where I needed to be, and here I am still. So thank you so much, Margie. And Steve.
Too much.
Remember, it's supposed to be fun.
Glaister.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Well,
Your mask.
I just want to
Your
say.
mask.
Oh, my mask. I just want to say to Steve and to Margie that we'll miss you both and wish you all the best as you go closer to your children. And, you know, you're sitting close together right now, but typically, one wouldn't realize that Steve and Margie are an item, because they're usually miles at different places in the church. We have Margie in the choir, and we have Steve sitting just about where he is now. And those in the know would know that they are together, and they're really a wonderful, loving couple. And the family as well are also just one unit with their kids. My children got to know them very well, and they talked about them all the time. Now, as far as helping people, they have helped a lot of people in this church, a lot. And they have mentored many, many, many as well. So our lives have been better from knowing them. And
For me, I was involved with stewardship. Steve taught me stewardship, what to do, how it runs. Margie really, really taught me stewardship. The people, meaning the parishioners in the church, who's like what and how they function, who not to bother too much, which is very important, and who is, someone who will help you all the time. So they both played their role. So one could go on and on. A lot of people have talked about things which I have witnessed, so I can confirm them. And we celebrate you moving closer to your children and grandchildren. And Steve and Margie, we wish you all the best. And we also wish you God's blessing along the way. Thanks.
Robert Abrahams, come on. Ruh-roh.
Thank you. Yeah, Chuck knows what's going on. I stand before you this evening, everybody, good evening, as the director of the local chapter of the Brotherhood. And I'm here tonight to recognize and extend, on behalf of the Brotherhood, I don't want to say a fond farewell to Steve, but as I sat down and I made various notes and jottings, primarily about Steve's contribution, everything sort of boiled down in my mind to just one word, and that's cornerstone. He is a life member of the Brotherhood. There are not a lot of them in the chapter, and if you ask Steve, he'll proudly tell you that he was the first ever life member of the Brotherhood. And that is in keeping with his spirit and exactly how he sees himself, and he devotes himself to a task. For the brothers, he has always been, and to myself, a source of wise counsel. Always there, in particular when you need it, but he is not one to shy away from sneaking up behind you and whispering in your ear when he thinks you need that wise bit of counsel. And if you think about it, as you know, it was always a shock to me after our first set of dinners and events in the parish hall to see our general washing the dishes. And that is Steve in a nutshell. He is not one to shy away from taking care of what needs to be done. And that is such a difficult trait to find, not only among, there are a number of brothers here, and I'll gladly say it's not a trait to be found among the brothers easily. Or should I say, Steve has set the standard that the rest of the brothers should aspire to. That, of course, for us is going to represent a great loss. And as the head of the local men's group, I think we all know who's to blame. I can only imagine that it's Steve's fantastic wife who gave him these great children, and in turn, great grandchildren, that has separated Steve from the local chapter of the Brotherhood. And if I didn't know her so well, and having worked with her for so long, there'd be a lot that she would have to answer to tonight. Suffice to say, you will both be missed, and with our permission, the brothers got together last week and we sent him off in style. I'm sure he'll remember it. The parts that he will remember, he may not remember much, but we won't hold him to it. To Steve and Margie, on behalf of the Brotherhood, fond farewell, and I think was it Sue who echoed that we'll look forward to seeing you again, I'm sure soon in the future. Godspeed.
Mabel, come on up. Go ahead.
I need to rest. Having made up the list of all the people who are going to speak, I knew a lot of the things, I could guess a lot of the things that was going to be said. And I told myself, I have to say things that nobody else knows. Margie started shaking. First of all, I apologize for the 45 years. I made a mistake in the first announcement saying they were here 45 years. I think it's 38, which means they have to keep coming back till they make up the 45. And they've started by staying an extra, 3 days? So they have 38, 6 years and 7 years, 9 or 3 days. Let me start with Steve. When I first heard that Margie had a husband, I wondered who this person was. Because at that time, Steve worked at IBM, right? 3M, one of the M's. 3M, and he was also in the reserve. So some Sundays he was not here. When I eventually met Steve and got to know him, I don't know what rank he was at the time, but all I know, he was this stiff, soldierly person. I got to know the Reeds quite well, and I was actually at the ceremony where he got his first pin as general. So now I had a station to use he's the general. Still a bit stiff, he was still the general. It wasn't until he had grandchildren, or his first grandson, and there was a change over Steve. He became, at least to me, he was more grandfatherly. Steve has a special seat in this church, and he better sit in that seat. When I think it was his first grandson was being baptized, there were 4 baptisms that day. So I prepared 4 seats, those two, and I put Steve and his family on that side. Steve walked in, saw where his family was, took them up and moved over to this side. Steve, in fact, the Reeds were always helping people. If there was a priest that was coming for the Sunday and had nowhere to stay, where did they stay? The Reeds. If somebody was coming here to work and didn't have anywhere to stay, they were always willing to help. Margie. That woman caused my kids to disown me. We were having a dance in the church, and I had to announce it. At that time, we used to do the announcement before the service. So Margie says, "You can't do it just like that. It was a costume dance. You got to wear a costume." So she brought a bunny suit. So first service, I walked up in the bunny suit and I made the announcement. Second service, Father Bob, who was the assistant rector, said, you can't walk up there, you have to hop. And Margie says, you got to hop up there. And Mabel, being Mabel, hopped up there, from the back to the front and back again. And my poor kids were crying. And I said, Margie made me do it. Margie and I did a lot of stuff together in the church. We never really had a hospitality committee. We never had anybody to plan things. So whenever there was something happening, Margie and I were the ones who did it. We did coffee hour, we did, you name it, something like this, we would have been the ones forefront in doing it. Till eventually we formed an hospitality committee, and we were able to sort of shed some of the work. When Erin was engaged, we had a garage sale here. And the Friday evening, we were setting up for the garage sale. And Margie saw a pram, pushchair, that was like new. And Margie says, I want it for my grandchild. Her daughter has not yet got married. And she bought the pram and she hid it. Of course, the poor girl, haven't gotten married. Margie keeps saying, when are they going to have a child? I said, maybe they're not doing it right. Why don't you go in their bedroom? Then my daughter gets engaged, because my daughter and Erin were about the same age. And Margie came to me and said, if your daughter ever has a baby before my daughter, you're in trouble. Let me end this now by saying that I saw the writing on the wall when Stephanie moved to Texas. I thought, that's fine, Erin is still here. Then Erin moves to Texas. And I'm like, okay. And then they bought a house in Texas. I said, this is it. They are going. So although I didn't want them to go, although I knew it was coming, and I knew they had to be where they had to be. So, Steve, Margie, good luck. God bless you.
Good evening. I'm Wendell from the third row.
Hold the microphone up, please,
Oh,
Wendell.
I'm sorry. Good evening. I'm Wendell from the third row on the left flank at St. Anne Eminem. I sit on the General 6 for years as an ordinary member. Then one day, I got tired of I see this man stand up when it's veterans. What the priest would say, will the veterans stand up? I saw square, eloquent. It was a sight to behold for years. For 3 years, I watched the general stand. And it inspired me. And I am a United States sailor. Hoorah, shipmate. Hoorah, shipmate. Father, my brothers, my sisters, greetings. General, Mrs. Reed, thank you for making me a part of history today. I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. First time I've seen a general in my career. He was in a tinted vehicle and I was on camp. The general is coming. I was happy because I said, okay, I know a general. He's a normal person. Then when this general turned up on base, there was more helos and tanks and the place get very small very quickly. And then I'm like, oh my, what's going on? I know a general. This doesn't happen. He walks into the church and he's a normal person. He's a humble guy. What's going on here? But I just want to show you the impact of the humbleness of General Reed. This is a man that has inspired and motivate and mold all of these great leaders that this church has right now. Robert, Truck, each and every one of us that has taken on leadership. General, you're responsible. I've been here for years, more than 20 years, sitting and watching. I didn't know that you were a general until recent. But I knew you were somebody because you inspired me to wear the uniform. And I wear it proudly, and I'm not scared to say I'm a United States sailor. I'm going to cut it short, but we need to know something that is not known. Mr. Reed, General Reed, I'm sorry. I owe you. We owe you. There were dark days, very dark. I was driving south on the 95. I was very sad, very depressed. And I just pressed the number and started to shake. First time I'm calling the general. He gave me his card like 2 years, and I had it. I never called his phone. I just called him. I said, sir, how you doing? And he calmed me down because he's a very humorous person. He takes that edge off you. And then I started breathing, and I felt relaxed. And we spoke. And everything just seemed right. Everything just seemed right. Because he gave me that courage. Because I saw him as a leader. And I look up to him. I loved him. I love his family. I watched. I see everything. I see his family grow. I mean, it's 20-odd years. If you see how the development of the youth with Aaron and Mrs. Reed and the choir take on these lay positions, and they molded us. They impacted us in a positive way. And I'm thankful. I'm very thankful. And I know there's one thing that happened when I thought I was going to lose. I thought I was going to lose. And I gave Father Mark a call and said, hey, listen, man, I got some trouble, man. Father said, I can't handle this, but I know somebody who can. And I said, ooh, if you can't handle it, who's going to handle this? You're a spiritual leader. What's going on here? Then I got a phone call. Then I heard this voice. And we spoke. And my life changed. And I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mrs. Reed. I was impacted by your family, and I appreciate and love you guys. Appreciate it.
Fred Rufa.
You can tell you're getting old when you have to get all your accoutrements on in order to do anything. Then I have to make sure they don't bother my hearing aids too much. Moving on. That's what we do in life. We move on. All our lives, from childhood through adulthood, we move on and we grow. Well, some of us grow, some of us just get older. We learn, we grow, we attempt new things as individuals, and as individuals we become couples, and then we move on to families. We move on to businesses, we move on to churches. If you're in the military, you move on too, from one rank to another. Y'all did this when you joined St. M&M, 40 years ago? About that? You helped this parish move on with your loyalty, your service, your participation in groups and activities, administering this parish, cooking for the Brotherhood, serving in the vestry, serving in the choir, establishing the vine. All of it is moving on. And as we get older, our movements change a little bit. Now St. M&M's and St. Martin's have moved on. Through your help, through Father Lee. And so you're going to move on again. New adventures, new service. I kind of envy the church you're going to join. I don't know who it is. I don't know where it is. You may not know. You do? Good. Do they know you're coming permanently? And they haven't locked the doors and run off? Okay. I'd remind you of one thing that my father said to my mother. My mother was one of these people who would do just about anything for a church. And finally, one day, he looked at her and said, "When are you going to learn how to say no?" I think they're going to find out, too, just as we did, what moving on really is. And I think they and you will have fun. And I hope you have a lot of fun moving on with them, with your children, with your grandchildren, and with your cats. And now we've been very serious for a long time. I would like to tell you one story that is not serious. And it doesn't have anything to do with anything we're doing here. This older country gentleman died. He went to heaven. And St. Peter met him at the gate and said, "Welcome, we've been waiting for you. We've got your place set for you. We've got your robe, we've got your harp, we've got your halo, we've got the whole thing all ready for you. But there's one thing, you have to pass a small test to get into heaven." And the guy said, "Oh, no, not a test." He said, "I'm terrible at tests. I was terrible in school at tests. You know, I don't do well with tests." And St. Peter said, "No, don't worry about it. It's a really simple test. One question, and it's really simple." And the guy said, okay, what's the question?" And St. Peter said, "What's the name of God's Son?" And the guy said, "What?" And St. Peter said, "What's the name of God's Son?" The guy thought for a minute, and he thought, "Oh, I know, it's Andy." And St. Peter said, "What? It's Andy? Well, how in the world did you get Andy?" And the guy said, "Well, we sing about it every week at church. Andy walks with me, Andy talks with me."
And last, Robert Hill.
Good evening. Heard a lot of interesting facts about Margie and Steve this evening that some I had heard before, and some of them just floored me, but they're all true. I told a couple of guys at the back of the church before we started here this evening that, you know, when I turned 50, I thought, geez, this isn't too bad. Then I turned 60, and I was getting a little creaky and not remembering as much as I wanted to. I turned 70, and I was told, "Oh, it's the golden years." And I said, no, I don't think so. I call it the brass years, because it's got a lot of tarnish on it. Anyway, I hope everyone is doing well this evening. I started with 12 pages with these two characters, but I knew you didn't want to know all the facts about them, so I boiled it down to just a few. It's with great sadness that the Reeds are leaving South Florida and moving to the Houston area so they can be much closer to their children and grandkids. It's totally understandable, but nevertheless, it will be a great loss to St. M&M's and all the friends they have made in the parish and the community. Let me give you a little background on my knowledge of the Reeds' involvement at St. M&M for those of you who don't know some of the other facts. I have known them for almost 24 years, or perhaps I should say I've known Margie for almost 24 years. Some of you have known them longer. Mabel, you're one of them. I met Margie on a Saturday morning in the church office almost 24 years ago. My wife and I had recently moved back to Florida after living in Denver for 6 years. We were trying to find a parish that was close to home. I got a local phone book and looked in the yellow pages to find an Episcopal church. St. Mary's was the closest. So I drove over to the church and saw several cars parked in the parking area behind the building, and I later found out it was the church office. Their door was unlocked, which doesn't happen today. And so I walked into the office, and I found this lady, Margie, standing on a ladder with a paintbrush in her hand, painting the ceiling in the office. I think she was happy to see anyone because it looked like she needed to take a break. I introduced myself, and we chatted for a while, and she told me about the parish, the rector, Father Stephen Eichler at the time, and bragged about the choir. She asked if I could sing, and I said, somewhat. She told me about the choir director, Gary Sturgis, which some of you know, Kathy Sturgis, the organist. I found out several years later she was always recruiting for the choir. It was a wonderful, wonderful meeting. Julie and I came to church the following Sunday, and the rest is history. And yes, we joined the choir some 20 years ago. Now, my introduction to the general, Steve, is a different matter. I need to give some background on him that you may not know about. Prior to Julie and I moving to Colorado in 1992 for almost 6 years, we lived in South Miami for about 11 years. Our family were members of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, and both of us were very involved in the activities of the parish, and yes, we were in the choir. After being there for a while, I found that there were really no activities that were focused on getting men involved in the life of the parish. And I had heard about a group called the Brotherhood of St. Andrews, and I did some investigation as to see what it was all about. I spoke with the rector, and he urged me to look into starting a brotherhood, which I did. Now back to Steve. Shortly after becoming involved in St. Mary Magdalene, I again found that there was little activity focused on men of the parish. After speaking with the rector, at that time was Father Eichler, I went about and established a brotherhood chapter and found out that years before, Steve had already started a brotherhood chapter at this parish. Father Eichler made an announcement at church that one of the Sundays that there was a men's organization that was in the process of being organized, and guess who showed up for the first meeting? Steve and about 20 other guys, and it was a marvelous way to start it off. But he was the founding father here at St. Mary's. That was my introduction to the general. Now, for those of you that don't know, I spent 25 years in the Marine Corps serving in both the active components and the reserves. I found out that Steve was in the process of completing over 34 years of service in the Army, both on active duty and in the reserves. As many of you probably know, there's always been a rivalry between the services, but not as much as between the Army and the Marine Corps. Steve was a colonel when I first met him, but shortly thereafter, he was being promoted to brigadier general. That's a 1-star. And after he was promoted to brigadier several years later, he was promoted to major general, which is a 2-star. Quite an outstanding accomplishment, an acknowledgement of his leadership abilities and years of service to his country. Steve spent his early career as an artillery officer, or as we say in the military, a cannon cocker. He graduated from Rutgers University, the University of New Jersey. Now, I can say that because I'm from Jersey. I don't have that twang most of the time. During those years, Margie was attending Douglas College, which is across the river from Rutgers, and that's how they became acquainted. Did you ever swim across the river at night, Steve? Having never had friends in the general ranks, I found Steve to be a very unique person with the title of general, in spite of him being in the Army. You know, I have to get at you a little bit here. He was a caring and intelligent person, and later found out he liked Scotch whiskey. All right. As the years went on, the hills and the reeds became friends. And even though I tried to pick on him from time to time, I never quite made much of an impact. But he would never miss on a Sunday, even though I was sitting up there and he was sitting down there. After the service was over, he'd always say, "You need a haircut." Well, I always wore my hair high and tight, as they say, but he would never forget that, and my typical response to him was, "Yes, General." Our focus tonight has been on Margie and Steve. They will be severely missed. Their years of involvement at St. Mary's can never be replaced. We wish them Godspeed and safe travels. There will always be a place at St. M&M's for you. We love you. On a personal note, when I was going through the problems with my wife, I had a very difficult time because I was basically all by myself, except for the Brotherhood, which I was going to give a big plug to, but that's set for another time. Margie and Steve and Dr. John and Stephanie and many other people in this parish supported me and pulled me up to get me through that tragic event in my life. And I thank you and I thank God for that. There's only one big problem I've been hearing that we're really going to have with their absence. Now we've got to find somebody to support the choir and be, out searching for new choir members. And now we've got to get a new head for the stewardship committee. Oh, we got a mess coming up. Oh, yeah. Any takers out there? God bless you, boy.
Steve, Margie, it's obvious that everybody loves you dearly, myself included. We will never truly be apart from you because we are connected through the body of Christ. And wherever we go, we carry each other in our hearts. And you will always have a place here to come back to. So we send you forth right now to the parish hall. And everyone else as well for some nice refreshments.